everybody, to the Old Time Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Excuse me. The Old Time Boxing Show is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation, so make sure you go find them on Facebook or look up Alex Ramos on Facebook also, who has a lot to do with that, him and Jackie Richardson. They do a lot of great things for retired boxers, so make sure you go check that out. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I want to welcome in my co-host, Christopher Shelton. How you doing, Christopher?
Good. Glad. Always enjoy doing this.
All right, and today our topic is Oscar Bonavena, who, I'll tell you, when I watch Bonavena's fights, I really don't understand why he doesn't get more credit than what he does, because he went life or death with Frazier and Ali both, and to be able to do that, you've got to be a great fighter.
Yeah, and certainly in the first fight with Frazier, he won one of the three judges' decisions, which we'll talk about. And maybe if the rules were a little bit different, he might have won the fight. But you're under certain kind of rules, and the rules change a little bit with boxing. It's not exactly like baseball and football. They change a little bit depending where you are.
Yeah, and when you look at it, his early career in New York City was under the management of a World War II hero and dentist, Marvin Goldberg. He was known at the start as the Argentine Strong Boy. His pro debut was on February the 1st, 1964. He racked up a quick string of early knockouts. But he was overmatched early, sometimes fighting twice a month. He lost by a decision in February of 1965 to a highly rated Zora Foley. And just from the newspaper accounts you read there, Foley dominated the fight, won 9 out of the 10 rounds. Zora Foley...
Yeah, I did.
Basically, he punctured the invincibility that Oscar Bonavena thought he had.
And I have watched the fight, and Foley did dominate him. Foley, incidentally, just because I'm doing these interviews from Phoenix, Arizona, is the best Phoenix heavyweight in our history. 1958, number one contender to Floyd Patterson. I think he would have beat Floyd Patterson, except Customato wouldn't beat him. I just want to stoke him up a little bit. And then Foley really did dominate Bonavena, knocked him down, first knockdown of Bonavena. And that's a legitimate decision. That's one guy who's very experienced, getting toward the end of his career, dominating the young guy.
Yeah, and Bonavena's manager after that said that he thought Foley was washed up. It was entirely his fault that he made a mistake there. And then you look at it, he goes on another run, and then he beats Georgie Peralta, who, if you've watched any Peralta fights, was a tough guy. He won a unanimous decision over him. Beat a tough Billy Daniels. When you look at his career early on, headed up to the Chevalo and the Frazier fights, this was a really talented boxer. He did lose a fight to Jose Giorgetti, but he came back and beat Giorgetti and by a unanimous decision, and the first loss was a DQ. But going into the Chevalo fight, Bonavena Chevalo, to me, had to be a big fight at the time, even though I didn't live back there, just looking at it, because you had this young up-and-comer, and they're two rugged guys. Chevalo went the distance with Ali, fought the fight of the year with Floyd Patterson. So this was a fight that had major consequences in the heavyweight division.
It is actually a very good fight. Again, which I sometimes tell the audience that, hey, you may want to take a look at this one. I don't remember if it has sound or something like that. It may not have had that, but it was a good slugfest. And I think one of the things Bonavena, first of all, improved always a little bit as a boxer, but I think one of the big mistakes against Zora Foley is he's a counterpuncher by nature, and I think he was being so cautious with Foley that cost him, and I think with Chevalo, he was willing to slug it out a little bit, and he had good hands, and he was, I think, a better boxer, not just when he counterpunched, that once in a while you got to be aggressive and go after the person, and he went after Chevalo to a certain degree, and I think that's why you get the results you get, a good win.
Yeah, and a lot of people thought that Chevalo had won that fight. I have watched the fight. It is silent from what I noticed, the only thing that exists from it. I did think Bonavena won, and Bonavena actually put Chevalo on the ground, even though they didn't call it that. And Chevalo said about Bonavena after that Bonavena was hard to fight, heavy-handed. He'd love a return bout. Then Bonavena gets to take on the Olympic gold medalist Joe Frazier. And to me, the thing that stood out here is, number one, he puts Frazier down twice, and they were legit knockdowns, and he had Frazier almost out of there. And it was only Frazier's 11th fight. I don't know why Frazier's people would have thrown him in with Bonavena that quick. But when you watch this fight, I mean, I thought Bonavena won the fight.
Well, yeah, it kind of depends again on these scoring decisions, and that Bonavena, to his credit, 'cause he knocked down Joe Frazier twice in the second round, and this was a third knockdown situation. So if he knocks down Frazier one more time, it's over, and he goes after him. He does go after the finish on Joe Frazier in the second round, though he doesn't make it happen. But unfortunately, because of the New York rules at the time, they really didn't score two knockdowns in a round like we would think today, where we call it 10-8 or 10-7 or something like that. They really just called who won the round. So Bonavena didn't get very much credit for it, and the only thing he got credit for in the knockdowns is if a referee calls it a draw, then they start looking at points or something else. And one of the referees called it a draw. They called it a 5-5 draw, and because of that 5-5 draw, Bonavena got credit for those knockdowns and was given the decision on one of the judges' cards. But on the other two judges' cards, one of the judges' cards was 5-4-1. So it was a 5-5 and a 5-4-1, and the one that called it 5-4-1 could not give Bonavena credit for more than one knockdown because that just wasn't the system. So Bonavena, under a different system, probably beats Frazier.
Yeah, I think under any system, he beats Frazier outside of the one that they used. When you look at this, 1967, of course, the WBA stripped Muhammad Ali the title for refusing to be inducted into the United States military. Bonavena participated in that sanctioning body's 1967 tournament to crown a new heavyweight champion. He had a strong performance and knocked down the favored European champion, Carl Mildenberger, who'd went the distance with Ali. He knocked down Mildenberger 4 times, winning by a decision in Frankfurt, West Germany. So he won that fight easy because it was in West Germany.
Right.
But he was himself knocked down twice and clearly outboxed by eventual tournament winner Jimmy Ellis. And I think when you look at this, it goes back to what you say. When it was guys that were coming forward that he could actually fight with, he was really hard to beat. But you get a slick guy like Ellis, and he loses the decision.
It's a really interesting, elimination tournament, even though we have to give credit that, hey, you took it away from Muhammad Ali, who was undefeated for no reason, and Joe Frazier didn't participate. So, yeah, you're dealing with 8 other guys who are good, but I don't know if you're dealing with 8 other people that are best. And Carl Mildenberger, does give Bonavena an interesting fight, but Bonavena's just knocking him down, too many times. You got to give Bonavena the win. And then Jimmy Ellis, Jimmy Ellis did this also with Jerry Quarry in the same tournament. Angelo Dundee was his trainer. Jimmy Ellis did fantastic. For the first 3 rounds, he absolutely dominates Bonavena and knocks him down. And not only knocks him down, but he really rattles Bonavena with that knockdown. That's a hard third-round knockdown. And then Bonavena starts to come back, and Ellis sort of hangs in there and knocks him down, I think, in the 6th round. And then from there, they're both getting exhausted, but you got to give Jimmy Ellis credit. Now, we can't do a boxing show about Jimmy Ellis because nobody wants to hear a boxing show about Jimmy Ellis, but that was a very impressive tournament for him, and Oscar Bonavena did go in shape. He did try. He was ranked number 3 by the WBA. Mildenberg was actually ranked number 1, and he fought a better boxer who had a good day and a harder punch than I think we give Jimmy Ellis credit for.
Yeah, I think a lot of these guys like Bonavena, Chuvalo, Ellis, Patterson, and Quarry all get underrated just because of how great Ali and Frazier were. And when you put them in against Ali and Frazier, they don't look that great. But, these are great fighters. All these guys we just mentioned, if we threw them in today, they'd probably be the heavyweight champion of the world.
Well, I'm not going to absolutely repeat what you said, but I agree that the problem is Ali and Frazier are so great that you get compared to them. So Bonavena, and we'll talk about it, that's really all he's compared against those 3 fights, 2 against Frazier and 1 against Ali. But you're right, they were so amazing that guys like Jimmy Ellis look like they're a chump. And Jimmy Ellis is a very good boxer. He probably wouldn't have become a heavyweight champion if they didn't take it away from Ali. That doesn't mean he's not a great boxer or deserves some sort of credit.
Yeah, and then in 68, I think it was July or August, Bonavena gets a return match against Foley. Now, Foley probably is on the way down a little bit.
Yeah.
And you've got Bonavena, close to his prime. And actually, the fight was scored close. It was a majority decision. But I don't think there's any doubt that Bonavena won that fight.
No, I don't think there's any doubt. And as I said, because I'm from Phoenix, I got to say nice things about Zora Foley. But he was shot a little bit, and that doesn't mean that Bonavena didn't fight well. Or again, I really think when I watched Bonavena, especially the second fight against Frazier, which we'll get to, I really think Bonavena was also improving his skills as a boxer. And the reason I say that is we've talked about Sonny Liston, who I like more than you, who I don't think ever really improved his skills. And some boxers don't really improve themselves in any way. And I think Oscar Bonavena really did sort of work a little bit to get a better jab, use his combinations a little bit more, think a little bit more in the ring. I think he was an improving boxer. So I think, he was in his prime and had a good fight against Zora Foley, who may have been shot, but you can't take that away from Oscar Bonavena. It still means a good win.
Yeah, and then next up, he finally gets a chance at the title, or what's left of the title, the New York State Athletic Commission World Heavyweight title. In a 15-round fight, he fights a rematch against Joe Frazier. I think he fought it in Philadelphia. Frazier was favored 3-1. And Frazier hit.
Was it 3-1? Was it 3-1? Honestly,
it was a 3-1 favorite.
I thought it was 7-5.
It says 3-1 here. So
okay, well,
and it's BoxRec. BoxRec knows their stuff. But
well,
Philadelphia. They fought in Philadelphia. Bonavena. I mean, this is a great fight. I could watch these guys fight all day. Frazier did win this fight. I think. I don't think he won it by the 74-64, 72-64 range. But I think the referee who had it 70-67 was about right. But, I mean, the fact that you can go 15 foul-packed rounds at the Spectrum, Philadelphia, against Joe Frazier really tells you how good this guy was.
Yeah, and just to throw out the only one we didn't mention, he had a good jab fest with Leotis Martin. But against Joe Frazier the second time, this time for the heavyweight title, and he did change his style a little bit. And one of the reasons why, if you give in to that first fight and say that, Frazier legitimately won it over the series of rounds and blah, 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 one of the things Frazier was doing is he's landing these really hard left hooks to the body and some jabs that are throwing Oscar Bonavena's jabs off balance, and that I think Bonavena was trying to fight Frazier a little different for the heavyweight title the second time around, and also thought, I can't let this guy throw left hooks to my body for, umpteen rounds, 15 rounds, because it hurts. And so he's trying to sort of alter his strategy a little bit to box him a little bit more. And I give him credit that he didn't back off Frazier, but he was trying to rethink his strategy against them. And then I think he tired by about the 14th round. And then the 15th round, he didn't just give in and quit. He tried once in a while to throw a couple combinations. He's trying to do whatever he can. He's exhausted. And Frazier, as we both agree, has a tenacious energy, just this unbelievable energy. And I think Bonavena, if he could have won those 14th or 15th rounds, it might have gone his way, though the judge's card says it wouldn't have. But it was a good fight, and I give Bonavena credit that he didn't back off of Joe Frazier, but he did rethink how smart it is to take those left hooks to the body.
Well, and then after the Frazier fight, he won a couple fights against Luis Faustino Perez, who was a decent fighter. Knocked out Manuel Ramos, who wasn't a great fighter, but he was a dangerous guy. And that leads us to December 7th, 1970, where he gets a shot against Muhammad Ali. It's for the vacant NABF heavyweight title. Ali, I think in October of that year, had beaten Quarry in his first comeback fight. And This is another fight where Ali's still pretty damn good. And Bonavena stands there with him. And Ali was a 6-1 favorite. Bonavena entered the fight as the WBA's number 1 ranked heavyweight contender. Ali predicted he would stop Bonavena in 9. And if you look at the pre-fight physical examination, was probably the most entertaining part of the fight, where Bonavena called Ali a big chicken and started making chicken noises. He then repeatedly called Ali by his pre-Muslim name, Clay, he said while laughing. Ali yelled to the crowd, "Please tell everyone to get to your theaters. I've never had a man I wanted to whoop so bad."
Clay, why you know an army? Clay, why you avoid army? And, it's funny. Oscar Bonavena is actually a pretty humorous, sort of funny guy. And English is not his first language, so it's very awkward to joke around in a second language and stuff. And he did his best. He was called Ringo because his hair wanted to look like Ringo Starr. So in the 60s, he's trying to be a little bit of a rock star, Argentinian, very big, handsome, all those kinds of things. But when he fights Muhammad Ali, he was set up almost like he's a chump, and he's not a chump. But God, you listen to Howard Cosell, and I like Howard Cosell, but they acted like, oh, you just threw this rag guy into the ring against Muhammad. I was like, no, he threw in a really good, experienced boxer who hits hard, and that Bonavena is trained. He's trying hard, and he's giving Muhammad Ali a little bit of fits because he gives almost every boxer fits. He's a weird style, and that he doesn't fight one way. So even if you watch films on Oscar Bonavena, you're not 100% sure what you're getting because he does alter his approach a little bit when it comes to counter punching, jabs, body punches. Is he going to go to left hook? Is he going to throw combinations? He mixes it up a little bit, so you've got to think about it. And Muhammad Ali was a patient guy, so he did take some hard punches. And it was also a different Muhammad Ali in the 1970s than the 1960s, which you were already seeing for the first time. But God, give Oscar Bonavena some credit. He showed up to fight, and he gave Muhammad Ali a pretty good fight. And then in the 15th round, Muhammad Ali, with only a minute and a half left, knocks him down 3 times, and there was a 3 knockdown rule.
Yeah,
so
I want to get that
happened
real quick because I think the ending's somewhat controversial. And I think it is because Ali stood over Bonavena as Bonavena was trying to get up. He never went to a neutral corner as the rules of boxing require, which allowed Ali to quickly knock down Bonavena twice more and automatically end the fight. After the second knockdown, if you watch the fight, the referee looks like he's trying to attempt to guide Ali to a neutral corner, and Ali just kind of brushes the referee's arm away and pursues a wobble to Bonavena. So Ali may have knocked him out, but I don't think it's so sure that would have happened just because of how tough Bonavena was if they'd actually given him the extra time that was required by the rules of the New York State Athletic Commission.
You know what? You and I don't discuss this in advance. I agree pretty much with everything you said. That in fact, Ali was not only not going to a neutral corner, but very early in the fight, Ali's doing the kind of things that would frustrate us with him in the 1970s, where he's yanking down the guy's head. He's playing around with the rules, and that it does seem like Muhammad Ali of the 1970s. There was one set of rules for him and a different set of rules for everybody else. And I do think what you're saying is the beginning of that, and that I didn't think about it, but you're right. He wasn't going to a neutral corner. The 3 knockdowns happened fast in a minute and a half, and then if Ali had to go to a neutral corner like he's supposed to, if nothing else, Bonavena probably lasts the distance.
Well, put it like this. The knockdown happened at 1:30. The official end of the fight was at 2:03. So
yeah, it was fast.
Knockdowns, that's within 33 seconds. Where
go
ahead.
I was just going to say, and even before that 15th round, we were getting the Muhammad Ali that honestly really frustrated me in the later 70s, and that was a guy who's really playing around with the rules when it comes to grabbing a guy's head and pushing it down and holding on in a way that's not right, and that nobody else would get away with that. Even rope-a-dope, another boxer might be stopped for not fighting. Ali, there's a different set of rules for him, understandably, because if something happens and Oscar Bonavena wins this fight, there's suddenly no Ali versus Frazier undefeated, the fight of the century. Nobody wants to stop the fight of the century for Oscar Bonavena.
Yeah, plus the thing is this, it's not just to stop it. It's that the fight becomes even bigger if a Bonavena who goes 25 hard rounds with Frazier is all of a sudden knocked out in the 15th round by an Ali who hadn't fought in 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And nothing else, Ali fought 41 rounds with Frazier and won the majority of them, but he never knocked down Joe Frazier, and Bonavena did it twice, and that's Bonavena's legacy. He knocked down Frazier twice, and he gave Muhammad Ali a pretty good battle, and you can't just blame Muhammad Ali's doing bad, and that's the only reason. No, Bonavena also, he always came, when it was a big fight, he showed up prepared, and I thought he showed up prepared for Ali.
Yeah, and after the loss to Ali in 1970, he had a brutally tough match with the underrated Al Blue Lewis, who gave Ali, he went on, I think he went 11 or 12 rounds with Ali a year or two after that. Bonavena really only fought intermittently over the next few years. He lost to Floyd Patterson in 1972. I think there's a caveat in that where he decked Patterson in the 4th round, and from everything I read, it looks like he broke his hand while doing it. And then probably his last go at being getting a shot at the title was a loss in 1974 to Ron Lyle, which effectively put him to a lower-ranking contender status. And after that is when his life, death, I guess, really comes in. And you have a guy by the name of Joe Conforte. Now, if I'm wrong on any of this, Chris, since you're our historian, interrupt me at any time. But it
gets pretty sorted from here, but let's go.
He was the owner of the Mustang Ranch brothel near Nevada, Reno, Nevada, I believe it was. He brought Bonavena to Reno in 1975 to promote a series of fights and to train on the 440-acre property. And because Bonavena became rather friendly with Conforte's wife, Sally Burgess, a woman who was 26 years older than Oscar, and the two flirted openly, which I'm sure Joe probably didn't appreciate. But a later investigation concluded they had began an affair. He signed a contract making the former madam his manager, although she'd never managed a fighter before. He gained weight, his condition deteriorated. The ranch had been burned down by an apparent arson some months earlier and been rebuilt, with over 100 bedrooms, fancy suites that included a blue room, whatever the hell that is, but
sounds pretty fun.
I can imagine. But Joe Conforte was not present at the grand reopening in early March 1976. But Bonavena circled around with, there was like 3,000 or 4,000 guests smoking big cigars and greeting him with, "How do you like my new joint?" Conforte banished Bonavena and Burgess from the ranch 2 days later. They were warned to stay away, and guards were ordered to stop them if they were trying to re-enter. Conforte moved out of the family house in town, shared with Burgess, and into the Blue Room. Willard Ross Breimer, Conforte's ex-convict personal bodyguard and security guard at the ranch, was called from a trip. Breimer cleaned out Bonavena's trailer and burned his papers and clothes in the street. At the family house, Burgess was plagued by utility shutoffs and other harassment. On May 19th, Burgess and Bonavena complained to the county sheriff about the harassment, which they thought was coming from Conforte, and drove to San Francisco to replace Bonavena's burned passport. They stayed overnight, taking adjoining rooms, and returned to Reno the next day. At 6 a.m. on Saturday, May 22nd, Bonavena drove up the locked gate at the Mustang Ranch and rang the bell. He exchanged words with an unarmed guard and demanded to see Conforte. Breimer stepped through the kitchen door with a high-powered rifle. The guard at the gate told Bonavena to leave. As Bonavena stepped from behind his car, someone said, "Freeze," and Bonavena was shot through the heart, either by Breimer or from a rear guard tower. A snub-nosed .38 revolver was found in his boot. 4 days later, Burgess returned to the ranch and took over, firing the armed guards and the ex-convicts. An investigator concluded that Bonavena was having an affair with Burgess and had bragged about taking over the Mustang Ranch, and that the guards had orders to shoot Bonavena if he showed up. Originally charged with murder, Breimer pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and served only 15 months in prison. Bonavena's body was returned to Argentina to lie in state at the Luna Park Sports Arena in Buenos Aires, where 150,000 people filed by to pay their respects to the fallen hero. That's what I got.
That's what I got. I basically have the same thing, and I'll keep it under 20 seconds or something. But, yeah, something around Bonavena got together with a guy, Dennis Hoff, is now the person that runs the Moonlight Bunny Ranch, and he wrote memoirs, which I haven't read, maybe one day, called Pimp. So, meanwhile, Bonavena gets together with the pimp's wife, who's older than him, and he thinks by getting together with the pimp's wife, he's going to take over the brothel. So meanwhile, the pimp gets somebody back that he knows will kill Bonavena if Bonavena shows up. Bonavena shows up. The guy kills him and gets 15 months for manslaughter. I mean, it's really sordid and sad. He was 33 years old, but essentially we said the same thing. But, yeah, it's a very strange tale involving a brothel. And, hey, you know what? Leave a pimp's wife alone. I don't care who you are.
Well, you're probably better off to leave anybody's wife alone, because that seems to piss them off when you're banging their wife.
But I got to tell you, I got to go to that blue light room. I don't know. Whatever that is, that sounds fun.
All right. So it looks like what we're going to do is we're going to start a GoFundMe page for Christopher Shelton to be able to go to the blue light room.
Yes,
at Mustang
absolutely.
Ranch. So you could go ahead, and if you want to donate to this, just hit us up at Grilling Truth on Twitter, and we'll see if we can take care of Christopher.
And I'll let all the audience know what the blue light room is. Hey, you know what? You might want to try it yourself.
Oh, hell, Chris. Between this and the Hands of Stone movie, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with you.
Yeah, I gotta keep my head more on just watching people beat each other up. But it was a lot of fun doing Oscar Bonavena. I watched a lot of rounds, and again, it was interesting, if nothing else, to see this guy improve, I thought, as a boxer as he progressed through his career.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, like I said, I think there's no doubt that he's one of the more underrated heavyweights, especially the 1960s and 70s. And like I said, that's why I think that era was the greatest in heavyweight division history, because you had guys like him, Jimmy Ellis, Zora Foley, even Leotis Martin was a decent fighter, Thad
Yeah.
Spencer, Mac Foster. It was loaded. And I mean, a
And
lot
it,
of those
okay.
guys, if you put them in the 1930s, or today, or in the last 15 years, may have been a heavyweight champion.
Different set of rules, and very potentially Oscar Bonavena beats Joe Frazier in that first fight, and that's his legacy. Different set of rules. Unfortunately, he was under rules which didn't give him much credit for 2 knockdowns in 1
Yeah, and
round.
see, the thing about that legacy is, if he beats Joe Frazier, Ali Frazier's not the biggest fight, of the last
No.
60 years, because he had been beaten.
And if Oscar Bonavena has a better, I think you lose. Actually, I think he really lost almost every round to Muhammad Ali. But nonetheless, if somehow he wins that fight against Muhammad Ali when Muhammad Ali's undefeated, you're right. There's no fight of the century. There's simply a good fight, but the fight of the century, you lose
Yeah,
that
but the
tag.
point is this: if he gets the decision the first time against Frazier, there's no fight of the century,
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
the O's at the back of their records are what made that a huge fight. That and the political circumstances that surrounded it and all that. But people wouldn't have thought that Joe Frazier would be a legitimate threat to Muhammad Ali just because he would have lost to Oscar Bonavena.
Absolutely, and the way it is, now we have everything on YouTube and the internet and stuff like that. A lot of people didn't see Oscar Bonavena knock down Joe Frazier 2 times, so he gets to remain undefeated. They haven't actually seen Bonavena, knock down Frazier 2 times. So you're right. There's a fight of the century where otherwise you have a good fight, but it's not at that high level.
Yeah, because it takes something special to create a fight like that.
Right.
It's just like Louis Schmeling was so big because Schmeling beat Louis the first time, and then you had the Nazis, and I mean, there's always underlying circumstances that make a fight huge, which is why we don't have huge fights anymore, because unless there's like a big 240-pound ISIS heavyweight that comes out, what's the big deal?
Right, and the last one I can think of, and you can tell me I'm wrong, the Pacquiao Mayweather, and then it turned out to be really disappointing.
Yeah, but see, I don't think that was anywhere near the level.
Oh, it probably was.
If it would have been 5-6 years earlier, yeah, I think it would have been.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree that if you're taking any kind of heavyweight fight involving Frazier and Ali, is there anything like it? You'd have to maybe say James Jeffries versus Jack Johnson.
Louis Schmeling.
Or something like
Johnson,
that.
Jeffries.
There's very few.
And I think just with the political circumstances, that's why those 3 fights were so huge. But I don't think you could get bigger than Louis Schmeling just with the Nazi thing. The American, you had a black American against a white Nazi. Well, he wasn't a white Nazi, but he didn't do anything to stop it. But I think that, and then Johnson Jeffries, the political ramifications of a black man fighting a white man for a heavyweight championship. So I think this, when you tell me this was the biggest heavyweight fight of all time or the biggest fight of all time, as long as you're telling me those 3 in any order, I would be good with it.
Yeah, I would too. I'd be okay with those 3. And then Ali, besides, hey, he's undefeated. You took this crown away from him unfairly, and meanwhile, there's people, and I respect them, who are so mad at him for the way he acted about, Vietnam, not just not serving, but the way he talked. It enraged people so that Joe Frazier became the white man's champion, though it was Joe Frazier that always lived in black neighborhoods, not Muhammad Ali.
Let's face it, though. The fact that Ali became a Muslim is what made Joe Frazier the white man's champion.
And partly that. You're right. The way he became a Muslim, because you can become a Muslim one way, but the way he did it upset people. Ali had a way of upsetting people, and that led to people wanting Joe Frazier to really badly beat this guy. And as you said, they wanted an undefeated Joe Frazier to face an undefeated Muhammad Ali to make it a fight of the century.
Yeah, and in the end, that's why Ali was so great, because he knew how to make half the people love him and the other half hate him. And that's what builds a huge fight. See, Floyd Mayweather understood how to make half the people hate him, but I don't think he understood how to make half the people love him.
And I also agree that Oscar Bonavena, even more than Doug Jones, but Oscar Bonavena almost screwed this up, the fight of the century, because he might have won the Frazier fight the first time under different rules, And then if nothing else, he was competitive against Ali. It's not just Ali's having a bad night. He is a different fighter, but Oscar Bonavena also is giving a good fight, a good performance, and he nearly screwed up everything.
Yeah, and if you look at him, the people he fought, how he did, I mean, very few people outside of Ali in the 1960s was beating George Chuvalo legitimately.
No, I mean the only thing with Bonavena is that Foley beat him legitimately, and that Jimmy Ellis really dominated him for about 3 rounds, and then held on from there.
Yeah, but once again, as we were talking, Foley and Ellis were really good fighters, especially Zora Foley.
Oh yeah, no, these are good fighters. Zora Foley's, like I said, the number one in our history, in Phoenix history. He's number one, and Jimmy Ellis is underrated.
Just tell me this: who's number 2 then?
Who's number 2? I'd have to think about that because that's all we really have. We really just, we kind of lean on him a little bit.
So is it that big a deal to be number 1 in a place where there's only one?
Well, when you live somewhere, you have these controversies, and the controversy is he should have had a chance to fight Floyd Patterson in 1958. Customato kept him away from it, and that we believe he would have beat Floyd Patterson. I do not believe he would beat Sonny Liston. If he was heavyweight champion and faced Sonny Liston, I think Sonny Liston knocks out Zora Foley. But I think Zora Foley in 1958
I think Zora Foley in 1958 or 59 is an entirely different beast than what we saw in 1963, 64, 65.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's why the first fight against Bonavena where he beats him is impressive because he really dominates him. And the second fight, I don't want to not give Oscar Bonavena any credit, but I do think Zora Foley was shot by that point. But nonetheless,
I would give Bonavena credit this, though. I think Foley was a really good version of Foley the first time they fought. And even though he'd only had a handful of fights, I mean, Oscar Bonavena did hang in there with him.
And Foley was a very dedicated kind of athlete and stuff. He was a military person, but he also wanted to please family, friends, the audience, and he did try to always show up in shape, ready to go. Whether he always pulled it off, he was a guy that was dedicated to his craft.
All right, Chris, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Make sure you check us every Monday at 1 Eastern on thegruelingtruth.net. You can find us on Spreaker, iHeart, TuneIn, basically wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. I want to remind you that if you go to thegruelingtruth.net, you can also find all sports, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, you name it, we've got it. So make sure you check us out at thegruelingtruth.net, and you can go in the iTunes store and download the Grueling Truth app. So for Christopher Shelton, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.